Your father is worthless. Do you hear me? Worthless. He sits in that broken down house with his broken down truck and his broken down life, and he acts like he's somebody. He's nobody, Lauren. He was nobody when you married me, and he's nobody now. And if you bring those kids over there one more time, if you let them sit in that man's garage and eat his garbage food and listen to his garbage stories, I will make sure you regret it. Every single time. The voice coming through my security camera's audio feed was so clear I could hear the spit in it. I was sitting in my kitchen at 9:47 on a Thursday night watching a recorded clip from the camera I'd installed above my front porch 3 months earlier. And the voice belonged to my son-in-law, Mitchell Voss, and he was standing in my driveway, right beneath the camera he didn't know existed, screaming those words into my daughter Lauren's face while she sat in the passenger seat of his car with the window down and her head turned away from him like a woman bracing for weather she couldn't escape. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't defend me. She sat perfectly still with her hands folded in her lap, and she waited for him to finish the way you wait for a machine to cycle through its program. Patient, practiced, automatic, like she had learned exactly how long his explosions lasted and had calibrated her silence to outlast them. The clip was 41 seconds long. I watched it 9 times. But to understand why those 41 seconds changed everything, and why the pattern I saw in that footage wasn't new but ancient, something I had watched destroy one woman already and was now watching attach itself to another, I need to take you back. Because Mitchell Voss didn't invent cruelty, he inherited it. And the woman he was practicing it on was my daughter. And the reason I recognized every syllable of what he said, the rhythm, the volume, the specific weapon of calling someone's father worthless to break the daughter's loyalty, is because I heard those exact words before, 34 years ago, in a different driveway, from a different man, directed at a different woman, my mother. My name is Jack Hollis. I'm 61 years old, retired commercial electrician, 32 years pulling wire, running conduit, and troubleshooting systems that other people built wrong. I own my house outright. And I drive a truck that's 12 years old because it runs clean, and I don't see the point of replacing something that works. My wife Diane died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She went in 4 months. We had 31 years together, and every one of them was good because I spent those years building the opposite of the house I grew up in. The house I grew up in was run by a man named Dale Hollis, my father. Dale was a foreman at a concrete plant. Big hands, bigger voice, the kind of man who measured his authority by how quiet the room got when he walked into it. He didn't hit my mother, not that I ever saw. What he did was worse in some ways because it never left evidence the neighbors could see. He diminished her, systematically, daily. In a voice that sounded reasonable if you only heard the words and didn't feel the weight behind them. He told her she was lucky he married her. He told her she couldn't manage a checkbook. He told her she'd fall apart without him. He told her that her family was beneath his, that her father was a failure, that her mother was simple, and that the only reason Lauren Hollis, my mother, had anything at all was because Dale Hollis had chosen her. He weaponized her father against her. That was his signature move. My grandfather, Eugene Price, was a quiet, gentle man who worked at a hardware store for 40 years. He fixed things. He built shelves for neighbors. He kept a workshop in his garage where he taught me to use a level before I could read. He was not a failure. He was a man who made an honest living and loved his family without conditions. But Dale called him worthless. Worthless. That specific word. He used it the way a knife uses an edge, to separate my mother from the person who gave her confidence. Because a woman who believes her father is worthless eventually believes she is worthless too. And a worthless woman doesn't leave. My mother never left. She stayed inside Dale's system until the day she died. Heart attack at 63. I was 27. I stood at her funeral and I looked at Dale sitting in the front pew with his jaw set and his eyes dry, and I understood, with the clarity that grief sometimes provides, that my mother didn't die of a heart attack. She died of 37 years of a man slowly convincing her that the people who loved her were worthless, and that the life she came from was worthless, and that without him, she was worthless too. I swore I would never be Dale, and I wasn't. Diane and I built something different, something warm, something where opinions were allowed, and arguments were fair, and nobody ever called the other person's family a weapon. But swearing you won't become your father doesn't protect your daughter from marrying someone who reminds you of him. Lauren met Mitchell Voss when she was 26. He was 29. He worked in pharmaceutical logistics, a title that sounded important and paid well enough to fund the image he maintained. Mitchell was handsome, articulate, and fluent in the language of aspiration. He talked about trajectory and positioning and 5-year plans the way other men talked about football. While he made Lauren feel like she was being invited into something ambitious, something bigger than a retired electrician's daughter from a house with a 12-year-old truck. I met Mitchell for the first time at a Sunday dinner at my house. He walked through my front door and his eyes moved across the rooms with an expression I recognized from deep inside my memory. Not admiration, assessment. The quick, horizontal sweep of a man pricing the environment and deciding where he stood in relation to it. Dale used to look at rooms the same way, not to appreciate, to rank. Mitchell was polite. He complimented the food. He shook my hand. He asked about my work. But the questions were wrong. Not rude. Wrong. He asked how long I'd been retired, how I spent my time, whether the house was a lot to maintain on my own. Actually, each question was a measurement disguised as small talk. He wasn't getting to know me. He was sizing me up. And the result of his calculation was visible in the way he smiled at me for the rest of the evening. A half smile. The kind you give someone you've decided isn't important enough to warrant a full one. Diane would have caught it. Diane could read a room the way I could read a wiring diagram. But Diane was gone, and I was sitting across from a man who reminded me of my father in ways I couldn't prove and couldn't explain because the evidence was in rhythm and tone, not in words. They married 18 months later. I paid for the wedding, $29,000. Mitchell's family contributed nothing and expressed no embarrassment about it. His mother, Carol, attended the rehearsal dinner and told me, while over a glass of wine she held like a scepter, that Mitchell was destined for great things and that Lauren was lucky to be along for the ride. She said it with a smile that was fully deployed and completely empty. I walked Lauren down the aisle and I placed her hand in Mitchell's and I felt the weight of the transfer in my bones. Not the symbolic weight, the real weight. The weight of knowing that the person you're handing your daughter to is going to shape the room she lives in, and you cannot control whether that room has air or not. The first 2 years of the marriage were quiet. Lauren visited me regularly. The visits were warm, but shorter than they used to be. She mentioned Mitchell's schedule a lot. Mitchell has a thing. Mitchell needs the car. Mitchell doesn't love long drives on weekends. Masya. Each mention was a small adjustment, a degree of rotation, imperceptible alone. But I was trained to notice when things tilted. She stopped wearing the necklace Diane had given her, a simple silver chain with a small pendant engraved with an L. She'd worn it every day since Diane's funeral. One Sunday, she showed up without it. I asked about it. She said, "I just forgot to put it on." Mo, she didn't forget. Lauren never forgot that necklace. Someone had made her feel like it wasn't worth wearing. She stopped talking about her job. Lauren was a speech therapist at a children's clinic. She loved it. She used to tell me stories about her patients, the breakthroughs, the small victories that meant everything to a child learning to say a word for the first time. Those stories disappeared from our conversations. And I asked her once how work was going and she said, "It's fine. Mitchell says I should look into something with better growth potential." Growth potential. A logistics phrase applied to a woman who spent her days helping 4-year-olds learn to speak. Nora was born in the 2nd year. My granddaughter, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Lauren's face, Diane's chin. I held her in the hospital and I felt the world reorganize itself around a new center of gravity. Then Mitchell took her from my arms after about 90 seconds and said, "We should let Mom rest." He didn't hand Nora back. He carried her to the other side of the room and held her against his chest and looked at me over her head with an expression that said, without words, "This one is mine." The pattern I was watching wasn't obvious to anyone who hadn't lived inside it. But Mitchell didn't scream at Lauren in public. He didn't call her names at family gatherings. He didn't do anything that a neighbor, a friend, or a casual observer would flag. What he did was quieter and therefore more efficient. He managed her environment the way Dale managed my mother's, through logistics, through scheduling, through the strategic distribution of criticism wrapped in helpfulness. "You should really let me handle the finances, babe. You're great at your job, but numbers aren't your thing. Your dad's place is fine for Sunday dinner, but let's not make it every weekend. The kids need routine. I love that you're close with your dad, but he's retired, he's got nothing going on, and we need to be building our own life, not spending every free hour at his house." Each sentence was a wall, a small wall. And a wall that alone meant nothing but together formed a structure designed to separate Lauren from the person who gave her confidence. The same structure Dale built around my mother. The same blueprint, the same materials, the same target. Me. Mitchell wasn't attacking Lauren directly. He was attacking her connection to me. Because a woman whose bond with her father is strong has a mirror. She has someone who reflects back the version of herself that existed before the marriage. And that mirror is dangerous to a man who needs to replace his wife's self-image with one he controls. So, you break the mirror. You call the mirror worthless. You tell your wife that the man she admires most is the man worth admiring least, and eventually she stops looking. I watched this happen over 3 years. I watched Lauren's visits decrease from weekly to bi-weekly to monthly. I watched the phone calls get shorter. I watched Mitchell answer questions that were directed at Lauren. I watched him roll his eyes when I talked about a wiring project or a repair I'd done on the truck. I watched him teach Nora to call me Pop Pop instead of Grandpa because he said, "Grandpa sounds so old." I watched him tell my grandson Theo, who was born the 3rd year, that Pop Pop's house is boring after I'd spent 3 hours showing the boy how to hammer nails into a scrapboard in my garage. Each moment was small. Each moment was familiar. Each moment was a note in a melody I had heard playing in my childhood home for 18 years before I was old enough to leave. The security camera went up 3 months before the driveway recording. I installed it because I'm an electrician and I install things when I sense a problem. The stated reason was package theft in the neighborhood. The real reason was a feeling I had in my gut that told me something was happening in my driveway during the visits that I wasn't seeing from inside the house. The feeling that Mitchell's performance adjusted depending on whether I was in the room. That the man who called me sir at the dinner table was a different man in the driveway, in the car, in the spaces where my daughter was alone with him and his real voice could come out. The camera recorded everything that happened on my front porch and driveway. Motion activated, audio enabled, cloud stored. It captured 37 clips over 3 months. Most were ordinary. Lauren arriving, kids getting out of the car, and Mitchell waiting in the driver's seat while Lauren brought the kids inside. Mitchell scrolling his phone during pickup. But 7 of the clips were different. 7 clips captured Mitchell talking to Lauren in the car during arrival or departure. And in those 7 clips, the man who called me sir at the table became the man who called me worthless in the driveway. The first clip, your dad acts like we owe him something for Sunday dinner. We don't owe him anything. He's alone because he's boring and people don't want to be around him. The second clip, I don't want Nora spending time in that garage. It's dirty, it's full of junk, and she comes home smelling like sawdust. That's not how I want my daughter growing up. The third clip, your dad gave you that necklace? It looks like something from a gas station. Yeah, take it off before we go inside. The fourth clip was the worst before the 41-second recording. Mitchell was standing at the passenger side of the car, and Lauren was buckling Theo into his seat. Mitchell leaned in and said close to her ear, but loud enough for the camera's microphone, if you keep prioritizing your dad over our family, I'm going to start making decisions without you. About the house, about the kids' school, about everything. You need to decide whose team you're on, Lauren. Whose team you're on. A man asking his wife to choose between him and her father. The exact mechanism Dale used on my mother. The exact tool. It's me or your family, Edna. My mother heard that sentence so many times she stopped hearing it as a threat. She heard it as a fact, as a natural law of marriage. Yet you choose your husband or you choose your blood. And if you choose your blood, the consequences are yours. Lauren was being given the same choice, and she was making the same decision my mother made. She was choosing Mitchell, not because she loved him more than she loved me, because the cost of choosing me had been made too high by a man who controlled the thermostat in her life and would turn the temperature to freezing if she picked the wrong side. I watched all 7 clips in one sitting on the night I discovered them. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and I watched my son-in-law systematically dismantle my daughter's relationship with me from 12 feet below a camera he didn't know was there. And then I watched the 41-second clip. The one where he called me worthless, the one where he threatened her, and the one where she sat with her hands folded and her head turned away and waited for the program to finish. I watched it 9 times, not because I needed to confirm what I heard, because I needed to feel it fully before I decided what to do. I needed the anger to settle into something harder than anger, something architectural, something that would hold weight. Because I wasn't just watching a man mistreat my daughter. I was watching a cycle. Dale's cycle. The same words, the same weapon, the same target. A daughter's father, called worthless, to break the daughter's loyalty, to isolate the wife, to control the home. My mother was the first woman this cycle consumed. Lauren was being set up to be the second, and if I didn't stop it now, Nora would be the third. Because Nora was watching, 5 years old, and sitting in the back seat of that car, hearing her father call her grandfather worthless, learning, without a single lesson being formally taught, that the men who love you gently are the men who deserve contempt, and the men who speak loudest are the men who deserve obedience. I was not going to let my granddaughter learn that lesson. Not in my driveway, not from my daughter's husband, not while I was alive, and the camera was recording, and the evidence was sitting on a cloud server with a timestamp and an audio track that no amount of charm could edit. I closed the laptop. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of the bedroom Diane and I shared for 31 years. And I talked to her the way I always talk to her when the world requires more from me than I think I have. I said, "Diane, I see it happening again. The same thing that happened to my mother. The same words, the same system, and it's eating our girl. I need to break it. Not just for Lauren, for Nora. Because Nora is watching. And what she's watching is becoming who she'll accept." Diane didn't answer. She never does. But the ceiling got lighter eventually, and the morning came. And I got up and made coffee and sat at the table with a legal pad and wrote down the names of every person I needed to talk to, in the exact order I needed to talk to them, before I showed anyone the footage. Because I had learned something from watching Dale destroy my mother. I'd learned that the cycle doesn't break by accident. It breaks by design. And the design starts with knowing who holds which piece of the structure and what happens when you remove the right one at the right time. While the legal pad had 4 names on it, 4 conversations, 4 pieces. And the last name on the list was the one that mattered most. Lauren. The first person I went to see was Carol Voss, Mitchell's mother. I drove to her house on a Saturday morning. She lived in a condo 20 minutes from mine, tidy, landscaped, the kind of place that performs taste without revealing personality. I didn't bring the footage, not yet. I brought a question. Carol answered the door with the same scepter-holding energy she brought to every interaction. Polished, elevated, the faint impression of a woman who had decided years ago that composure was the same as authority. "Jack, what a surprise. Is everything all right? I need to ask you something, Carol. And I need you to answer honestly." She invited me in. We sat in her living room. She offered coffee. But I declined. "Did Mitchell's father talk to you the way Mitchell talks to Lauren?" The composure cracked, not shattered. Cracked. A hairline fracture that ran from her forehead to her jaw in under a second. She set her cup down. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. I grew up in a house where my father called my mother's family worthless to keep her isolated. I watched it for 18 years. I know what the system looks like. I know how it sounds. And I'm asking you directly whether Richard Voss did the same thing to you." Carol was quiet for a long time. The clock on the mantel ticked. The composure reassembled itself, but slower this time, like a machine trying to restart with a damaged part. "Richard was a difficult man," she said, "but he provided." "That's not what I asked." "He had opinions about my family. He thought they were beneath his. He made that clear." "Did he use that to control you?" She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw something I recognized. Not pain, exactly. The scar tissue that forms over pain when you've spent decades pretending the wound doesn't exist. The specific, layered, calcified residue of a woman who was told her family was worthless so many times that she eventually agreed and built her entire identity on the agreement. "My family was beneath his," she said. "That's just the truth." She believed it. She had internalized Richard Voss's contempt the way my mother internalized Dale's. And because she believed it, she had raised a son who believed it was normal. Mitchell didn't learn to call fathers worthless from a manual. He learned it at dinner. He learned it from watching his father diminish his mother's family until the diminishment became the family language. He inherited the cycle the way people inherit eye color. Without choosing it, without recognizing it, without knowing it was a cycle at all. Carol, I said, Mitchell is doing the same thing to Lauren. He calls me worthless. He isolates her from me. He controls her schedule, her clothing, her self-image. He's doing it in my driveway while my granddaughter sits in the back seat and listens. She didn't respond. And if nobody stops it, Nora is going to grow up inside the same system you grew up in, and the same system your son grew up in. And she's going to marry a man who treats her the way Richard treated you and the way Mitchell treats Lauren, because that's how cycles work. They don't stop on their own. Someone has to break them. Carol set her cup on the table. She looked at her hands. What do you want from me? I want you to know that when I show Lauren what I have, and when the consequences come, they're not coming from anger. They're coming from a man who watched this system eat his mother alive and is not going to watch it eat his daughter. She didn't say anything else. I stood up. I walked to the door. As I was leaving, she said, very quietly, Richard used to say my father couldn't change a light bulb. I turned. My father said my grandfather couldn't manage a checkbook. She looked at me. For 1 second, we were two people standing in the same scar, holding different versions of the same wound, separated by a generation but connected by the exact same sentence structure. Your grandfather, she said. Was he worthless? He was the best man I ever knew. She nodded. The nod was small, but it was the first honest movement I'd seen from Carol Voss in 5 years. The second person I went to see was Angela Vasquez, my attorney. I'd kept her card since a friend recommended her years ago. I brought the footage, all 7 clips, including the 41-second recording. Angela watched each clip without expression. When the last one finished, she closed the laptop and said, This is textbook coercive control, the isolation from family, the financial gatekeeping, the identity erosion, the threats tied to parenting decisions, and the language about your daughter needing to choose a team is a direct threat of consequences for maintaining a relationship with her father. She told me what the footage could do. In a custody dispute, audio evidence of a parent using threats to control the other parent's family relationships is highly relevant to a judge assessing the emotional environment of the home. In a divorce filing, it strengthens the case for primary custody with the parent who demonstrates healthier relational patterns. And in a protective order hearing, repeated recorded threats tied to specific behaviors constitute a documented pattern. But none of this moves forward without Lauren, Angela said. She has to decide to use it. I know. Are you sure she will? No, but I'm going to give her something she's never had. Proof. Not my opinion, not my instinct, not my memory of what happened to my mother. Proof. On video, with audio, time-stamped, showing her exactly who her husband becomes when he thinks nobody is watching. Angela nodded. When are you going to show her? Sunday. She's bringing the kids for dinner. Do you want me there? No. This part has to be a father and his daughter, just us, the way it should have been before he got between us. The third person I went to see was Nora's kindergarten teacher. Her name was Mrs. Delbini. I went to the school on Monday morning before Lauren's Sunday visit. I didn't show the footage. I asked one question. Has Nora ever said anything about her home that concerned you? Mrs. Delbene was quiet for a moment. Then she said, She told me last week that Daddy says Pop Pop's house is yucky. But then she said she likes Pop Pop's house because it smells like wood and he lets her help with the hammer. She seemed confused, like she was holding two truths that didn't fit together. Two truths that didn't fit together. And a 5-year-old girl trying to reconcile the world her father described with the world she experienced. Being told the place she loved was yucky by a man she was supposed to trust. The same dissonance I lived inside as a child. Loving my grandfather, hearing my father call him worthless, trying to hold both realities in a brain too young to understand that one of them was a weapon. I thanked Mrs. Delbini. I drove home. I sat in the garage my grandchildren loved, the one Mitchell called dirty, the one that smelled like sawdust and cedar, and I felt something settle in my chest that had been unsettled since the night I watched the 41-second clip. The cycle had already reached Nora. It had already started teaching her that the gentle things are shameful and the loud things are authority. No, she was 5 years old, and she was already confused about which truth to hold. And if I waited any longer, the confusion would calcify the way it calcified in Carol Voss, the way it calcified in my mother, the way it calcifies in every woman and child who is told by the loudest voice in the room that the people who love them quietly are the people worth the least. Sunday came. Lauren arrived with the kids at 4. Mitchell dropped them off. He didn't come inside. He sat in the car and scrolled his phone, and Lauren unbuckled the kids and brought them up the walkway, and the camera above the porch recorded Mitchell muttering something to himself in the car that I would listen to later. For now, I focused on Lauren. Dinner was normal. Nora helped me set the table. Theo sat in his high chair and threw peas at the dog I didn't have, which made everyone laugh. Lauren was quieter than usual. She was wearing a gray sweater, no necklace. She looked tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. After dinner, I put the kids in the living room with a movie. I told Lauren I needed to show her something. She followed me to the kitchen table. I opened my laptop. "What is this?" she asked. "This is a security camera I installed 3 months ago above the front porch. It records video and audio, motion activated. It captures everything that happens in the driveway." Her face didn't change, but her body did. She went very still. The same stillness from the 41-second clip. The stillness of a woman who knows what's about to happen and is already bracing. "I'm going to play you 7 clips," I said, "and I need you to watch all of them before you say anything." I pressed play. She watched. Clip 1, clip 2, clip 3, the necklace clip, the team clip. Each one landed on her face like a physical blow absorbed in slow motion. By the 4th clip, her hands were gripping the edge of the table. By the 6th, her jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Then the 7th clip, the 41-second one. "Your father is worthless." The word hitting the driveway audio like a gunshot. Mitchell's face, distorted with contempt, leaning toward the passenger window where Lauren sat motionless. And in the back seat, barely visible but unmistakable, Nora's face. Watching, absorbing, learning. The clip ended. The kitchen was silent. The movie played in the other room. Nora was laughing at something on the screen. The sound of her laughter drifted into the kitchen like light entering a dark room. Lauren looked at me. Her eyes were full, but the tears hadn't fallen. They were being held by something, not composure, decision. "How long has he been doing this?" I asked. "Yeah, since before the wedding," she whispered. "But it got worse after Nora. He's doing to you what my father did to my mother." She looked up sharply. I had never told Lauren about Dale, not in detail, not the system, not the weapon. I had protected her from that story because I thought protecting her from the past would protect her from the future. I was wrong. The past doesn't stay in the past. It replicates. And the only defense against replication is knowing what it looks like before it takes hold. I told her everything. Dale, my mother, the word worthless, aimed at my grandfather, the isolation, the diminishment, the way my mother stayed until her heart stopped, and how I always believed the heart attack was the final symptom of a disease that started with a man telling his wife that the people who loved her weren't worth loving. "Mitchell learned this from his father," I said. "His father did it to Carol. Carol accepted it. She raised Mitchell inside it. And now Mitchell is running the same program on you. Same words, same system, same target. He calls me worthless to separate you from the person who gives you strength. He controls your schedule to limit your access to people who see you clearly, and he's doing it in front of Nora." Lauren's tears fell. Not the held breath, controlled kind. The kind that come from the deepest part of a person's structure when the load shifts and the foundation finally moves. "Yeah, Nora told her teacher that Daddy says Pop's house is yucky," I said. "But she told her she likes it here because it smells like wood and I let her help with the hammer." She's 5 years old and she's already trying to reconcile 2 versions of reality. And if we don't stop this now, she'll spend the rest of her life choosing between what she feels and what she's told to feel. Just like my mother did. Just like Carol did. Lauren put her face in her hands. She cried for 2 full minutes. I sat across from her and I waited. I didn't touch her, I didn't speak. I let the weight of the truth settle, because truth needs room to land and rushing it only makes it bounce. When she lifted her head, her face had changed. Not to anger, not to determination, to clarity. The specific, hard-edged clarity of a woman who has just seen the machinery behind the curtain and is no longer confused about whether the machine is real. "I need a copy of those files," she said. "They're already saved. Angela Vasquez is a family law attorney. Her card is in that envelope on the counter. She's reviewed the footage. She says it's strong." Lauren looked at the envelope. She looked at me. "You've been getting ready. For 3 months, since the camera went up. You knew." I recognize the pattern. I've been watching it my whole life. I just couldn't prove it until now. She picked up the envelope. She held it the way you hold something that has the power to change the direction of your life. Carefully, with both hands. Dad, she said, he told me you were nothing. He told me so many times I started to believe it. Not in my head, in my body. In the way I hesitated before calling you. In the way I felt guilty for coming here. He made it feel like loving you was a defect. That's how the system works. It makes loyalty feel like weakness. I don't feel weak right now. You're not weak. You were never weak. You were inside a machine. And the machine is very good at convincing the people inside it that the machine is normal. She stood up. She walked to the living room doorway. She looked at Nora sitting on the couch, all cross-legged, watching the movie, laughing. Theo was asleep in the corner of the couch with his thumb near his mouth. She's going to be okay, Lauren said, not as a question, as a decision. Yes, she is. Lauren called Angela Vasquez on Monday. She filed for divorce on Wednesday. The footage was submitted as part of the initial filing, along with a detailed statement describing the 3-year pattern of coercive control, isolation from family, and emotional manipulation. Angela filed for a temporary custody modification and a protective order based on the recorded threats. Mitchell was served at work. He called Lauren's phone 17 times that evening. She didn't answer. She was at my house, with the kids, in the garage. Nora was hammering nails into a scrapboard. Theo was sitting on a blanket watching. Lauren was sitting on a stool by the workbench wearing Diane's necklace, the silver chain with the L pendant, which she had retrieved from a drawer in her bedroom where Mitchell had told her to put it because it looked cheap. It didn't look cheap. It looked like the last gift a dying woman gave her daughter. And the fact that it was back around Lauren's neck told me everything I needed to know about where the cycle had broken. The court hearing was 6 weeks later. Mitchell's attorney argued that the recordings were obtained without Mitchell's consent and should be inadmissible. Angela countered that the recordings were made on my private property, in a jurisdiction with one-party consent for audio recording, and that I, as the homeowner, was the consenting party whose property was being recorded. The judge admitted the footage. The judge watched all 7 clips. When the 41-second recording played in the courtroom, the room went silent, the way rooms go silent when something ugly that was supposed to stay private becomes public. Mitchell sat at the defense table and stared straight ahead, and his lawyer put a hand on his arm, and Mitchell didn't move. The judge ruled. Primary custody to Lauren. Supervised visitation for Mitchell. Contingent on completion of a domestic violence intervention course. The house was to be sold and proceeds divided. And the judge added in her remarks, a sentence I will never forget. The court finds that the respondent engaged in a sustained pattern of emotional coercion designed to isolate the petitioner from her primary family support system, and that this pattern was witnessed by the minor children in circumstances likely to cause lasting psychological harm. Witnessed by the minor children. The judge saw what I saw. Nora in the back seat, watching, absorbing, learning. Carol Voss called me the week after the hearing. She didn't defend Mitchell. She didn't blame Lauren. She said one thing. My husband did the same thing to me for 28 years, and I let my son watch. I know, I said. I'm sorry, Jack. I'm not the one who needs the apology. I know, but I don't think she'd take my call. She might, eventually, but not yet. Carol was quiet. Then she said, Does Nora still like your garage? She loves it. Good. Richard would have called it dirty. Mitchell already did. I know. That's how I knew you were right. She hung up. While I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, and I thought about 3 women across 3 generations. My mother, Carol, Lauren. 3 women told by 3 different men in 3 different kitchens that the people who loved them gently were the people worth the least. 3 women who sat in 3 different passenger seats while the loudest voice in the car rewrote reality. 3 women inside the same machine. 2 of them stayed. 1 of them left. And the one who left did it because a camera I installed above my porch caught 41 seconds of a man's real voice in a driveway. And because a father who grew up watching the cycle decided this was the generation where it ended. Lauren and the kids live in an apartment 15 minutes from my house. She visits every Sunday. Not because a schedule permits it, because she wants to. Yeah, the visits are long. The kids eat at my table. They play in my garage. Nora is learning to use a handsaw under my supervision. Theo follows her around holding a tape measure he doesn't know how to read yet. Lauren wears the necklace every day, the silver chain with the L pendant. Diane's last gift, the one Mitchell called cheap, the one that was never about the metal. It was about the message. That you are loved by someone who chose you, who named you, who gave you something to carry forward. Nora asked me last weekend while sanding a piece of pine in the garage, Pop, am I allowed to like it here? The question broke me. Not because it was sad, because it proved the cycle had reached her. A 5-year-old girl standing in a garage she loved, asking permission to love it. Yet because someone had taught her that the things she felt weren't safe to feel until the right person approved them. I knelt down. I put my hands on her shoulders. I said, "You don't need permission to love a place that loves you back. This garage loves you. I love you. And nobody gets to tell you that the things you love are wrong." She nodded. She went back to sanding. The sawdust fell on the floor in a fine powder that smelled like cedar and effort and time. My father called my grandfather worthless. Mitchell called me worthless. The word traveled down 3 decades and landed in a driveway on a Thursday night and was captured by a security camera that a retired electrician installed because he'd spent his whole life learning to read the signs before the structure fails. The structure failed. Mitchell's structure. May the one built on volume and control and the specific poisonous belief that gentlemen are weak men and daughters should be separated from fathers who love them. That structure is down. The camera is still up. The garage is still open. The sawdust still smells like cedar. And my granddaughter no longer asks permission to love the things that love her back. She just loves them. The way Diane loved her. The way my grandfather loved me. The way love is supposed to work when nobody is standing in the driveway, calling it worthless, trying to make it stop. It didn't stop. It grew. It grew through the footage and the lawyer and the court and the hearing and the ruling and the apartment and the Sunday dinners and the handsaw and the sanding block and the necklace around my daughter's neck. It grew because one man heard the word worthless from a security camera and remembered where he'd heard it before and decided that this time the word dies here. In this driveway, in this generation, on this footage, it dies here and the garage stays open.